Hello, welcome to my channel and thank you for being here. Today I'll discuss three images. The first one that you've seen, the caption reads simply Cotton Pickers in Gwavuma, KwaZulu-Natal, 1993. And this image was taken on an assignment. It's a rare image that I have that I've used from assignments. And the assignment was for the Development Bank of Southern Africa, South African institution that I worked for quite extensively for a few years, and yeah, and then suddenly was dropped, and other photographers, you know, took over um, that role. And I traveled quite extensively around the country at the time, working for the DBSA, Development Bank of Southern Africa, working on um, kind of development projects that were being funded. Um, I had interestingly been to this place before um, for an NGO, and not on assignment, but accompanying that NGO to access um, um, areas of interest. And so um, this cotton project is an interesting project in itself, in its entirety, in that it was developed in the 1950s by the apartheid state, South African government at the time, Nationalist Party project, which was its intention was to create an agricultural project for small farmers, small white farmers, that is, um, a kind of a cooperative project, um, which was, in keeping with the Nationalist Party politics of the time, similar to what the kind of things, the kibbutz things that were happening in Israel, I imagine. And, if you like, the Soviet Union, and a collectivist approach to fast tracking agriculture for disenfranchised communities. Some of you might know that, for instance, um, South Africa had a poor white problem in the 1920s, largely Afrikaners who were coming off farms and unable to gain traction in the world. So there were projects similar to this. This project centered around the Jozini Dam, huge dam that was built to create the irrigation on this plain, the Ngwavuma flats, that was going to be the nexus for this agricultural project. And it hit several problems, this project. The one was that the dam was poorly designed and easily um, extended, the dam water extended something like 30 square kilometers into Swaziland when there was heavy rains and flooding like that, and so they had to release water down into this floodplain, and in the way that they had to do that was damaging to the ecology of the area. So dams, in as necessary as they are, need to be designed with great care for these kind of issues. So the second problem was that, for whatever reason, I can imagine some of the reasons, white farmers didn't sign up in adequate numbers for this project. There were other opportunities, perhaps. They thought they could make a better living working on the railways, for instance, or many other parastatal state projects that were providing job employment opportunities. So it kind of limped along for a long time. And then in the 70s and early 80s, I think this apartheid state saw it as an opportunity to bring in black farmers. And so there were quite a lot of black farmers who did come into this project. And it was an opportunity for black farmers to, and again there were a lot of problems, that, and I don't remember all of the issues. I mean, I was the photographer and kind of somewhat tuned into the issues that were unveiling at, sort of rolling out at the time. But I mean, one of the problems was that black farmers just felt that they didn't have enough autonomy and sovereignty over their farms. They were tied into this big project that had, for instance, aerial crop spraying, and so they had all these high costs that they had to deal with that they felt that they didn't. So there was a lot of discontent around issues like that. The cotton, for instance, was GMO, and GMO, in as much as it's been touted as this wonder technology, has downsides, and 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 I think that was one of the issues that they faced as well. But if you look at the image, you see, you might be looking at the deep south in the US, in the 1850s. You know, the conditions that the actual workers are subjected to in these kind of industries, um, and so yeah, quite a despondent project that needs somehow to be resolved, rectified, and resolved. Um, I'll move on now to the second two images look at environmental issues. The first one that you're seeing now is, as this sign says, toxic dump. And again, here, this was a project that I piggybacked on with the Weekly Mail at the time, Eddie Koch. And this was an issue that EarthLife Africa and Chris Albertine in particular was dealing with in the Pietermaritzburg, unearthing literally these toxic dumps. That black mass you see to the right of the image was a, a, a mess of corroding 44-gallon drums, metal drums that had ruptured and had been with stored toxic materials were stored in them, and they were now leaching into the earth. Huge numbers of them dug into the earth and causing this enormous problem. And as you can see, right next to rural dwellers' homes. So yes, there was a lot of this kind of stuff happening. I think throughout the country. I think the intrepidness of teams like EarthLife Africa did, and investigative journalists did manage to unearth some of them. But an ever-present danger in our country and in third world, so-called developing countries that are susceptible to this kind of malpractice. There are intelligent and suitable ways of disposing this. They cost money, and our economic system doesn't have the means, or it has too many loopholes that unscrupulous politicians and businessmen can exploit um, to profit off these kind of issues. The third image I'm looking at, we'll look at, is a more obvious one, and the caption reads: "The erosion in the homelands caused by overcrowding and poor soil quality. Matuba, KwaZulu-Natal, 1993." And this is a depressingly too familiar sight for people who spend time in the homelands, visit or have business there or live there. Um, in some places worse than others. I've seen this in the Eastern Cape as well a lot, and I think it's everywhere in this country. And it's a sad legacy that we have for, that hasn't not been resolved yet, for having compressed 80% of the population into less than 20% of the land. And for a people who are agrarian, who are um, um, cattle rearing people who raise cattle and livestock. This is just lethal for the environment, for the soil, because it easily depletes the soil conditions, if it comes after the fact that those 80% of people were put deliberately into 20% of the poorest quality land, it's a no-brainer that this is the situation that one faces. And I'll drop in at this point an aerial image that I couldn't find the vertical one that actually it pronounces it much better. I'm having a problem with my computer that has most of the information on it has crashed, and it's hopefully I'll have it up and running in a week or two. But yes, this image speaks to the urgency for us to resolve the land issue, and stop quibbling about who can farm and who. People need land. People live on the land. Huge numbers of people live on very small amounts of land. Here, I'm surrounded by that. I look across at tribal land, and the average person 40 years ago, back then, had 10 acres of land to farm in sugar. Back then, a viable sugar farm needed to be 50 acres. Not 50, 500 acres. 500 acres to be viable. And so, and of course, increasingly people are farming cattle. That's what they do best. So we need to create the environment in which that in which the people can be on the land and live in it. So I'll end it here and say more information on myself and my work can be found on my website, a link to which, including my blog and email address, can be found in the video description below. If you like this talk, remember to click the like button and press subscribe. It helps the channel grow. Thank you for watching.